ॐ उपदेशसहस्रे रूपसंस्कारतुल्याधिरागद्वेषो भयं च यत् गृह्यते धीश्रयं तस्मात् ज्ञाता शुद्धो भयः सदा. Desire, aversion and fear have a seat, that is the intellect and not the self, common with that of the impressions of colors. As they have for their seat the intellect, the knower, the self is always pure, free from desire and aversion, and devoid of fear. यन्मनास्तन्मयोऽन्यत्वेनात्मत्वाप्तौ क्रियात्मनि आत्मत्वे चानपेक्षत्वात् सापेक्षं हि न तत्स्वयं. The meditator assumes the form of the object meditated upon, for the latter is different from the former, but there can be no such actions like meditation, etc. in the self for its establishment in itself, as it is the self and independent of actions. For it would not be the self if it depends on actions. Liberation, which is that of the nature of the self. खमिवैकरसाज्ञप्तिरविभक्तजरामला चक्षुराद्युपधानात् सा विपरीता विभाव्यते. Pure consciousness, like the ether, Nirnay Sagar and Lotus Latex reads from instead of thumb, is of one homogeneous nature, undivided, without old age and without impurity. It is conceived to be of a contrary nature on account of adjuncts such as the eye, etc. दृश्यत्वादहमित्येष नात्मधर्मो घटादिवत् तथान्ये प्रत्यया ज्ञेया दोषाश्चात्मामलो यतः. What is called the ego is not the property of the self, as it is an object of perception like jars and other things. So are to be known the other functions and the impurities of the mind. The self therefore is without any impurity. Sarva pratyaya sakshitvadavikari cha sarvagah विक्रियेत यदि द्रष्टा बुद्ध्या देवाल्प vidbhavet. The self is changeless and all-pervading on account of its being the witness of all the functions of the mind. It would be of limited knowledge like the intellect, etc., if it were subject to change. न दृष्टिर्लुप्यते द्रष्टुश्चक्षुरादेर्यथैव तत् न हि द्रष्टुरिति युक्तं तस्मात् द्रष्टा सदैकदृक्. Unlike the knowledge gained through the eye, etc., the knowledge of the knower does not cease to exist. It is said that the knowledge of the knower does not go out of existence. These stand for all the qualities of the mind, good and bad. The knower, therefore, is always of the homogeneous nature of knowledge, pure consciousness. Sanghato vasmi bhutanam karananam tathaiva cha vyastam vanyatamo vasmi ko vasmi iti vicharayet. One should determine thus, who am I? Am I a combination of the elements or the senses, or am I any one of them separately? व्यस्तं नाहं समस्तं वा भूतमिन्द्रियमेव वा ज्ञेयत्वात् करणत्वात् च ज्ञातान्योऽस्मात् घटादिवत्. I am not any one of the elements separately nor their aggregate. Similarly, I am not any one of the senses nor their aggregate, for they are objects like jars, etc., and instruments like axes, etc., of knowledge respectively. The knower is different from all these. आत्माग्नेरिन्धना बुद्धिरविद्या कामकर्मभिः दीपिता प्रज्वलत्येषा द्वारे श्रोत्रादिभिः सदा. Placed, one gets unattached if one considers the perceptions of objects to be obligations to the fire, oblations to the fire of the self. Fuel keeps fire burning. The intellect keeps the self in manifestation. Placed like fuel in the fire of the self and burning brightly by ignorance, desire and action, the intellect always shines forth through the doors called ears, etc. दक्षिणाक्षिप्रधानेषु यदा बुद्धिर्विचेष्टते विषयैर्हविषा दीप्ता यात्माग्निस्थूलभुक् तदा. The fire of the self is the experiencer of gross objects in the waking state. When the intellect ignited, assuming the forms of by oblations, the objects functioning among the senses of which the right eye is the chief. हूयन्ते तु हविंशीति रूपादिग्रहणे स्मरन् अरागद्वेषात्मग्नौ जाग्रद्दोषैर्न लिप्यते. One does not get attached to the impurities of the waking state if, at the time of perceiving colors, etc., one remembers that oblations are being offered to the fire of the self. And remains free from desire and aversion. मानसे तु गृहे व्यक्तस्सु विद्या कर्मवासनां पश्यंस्तैजसात्मुक्तः स्वयं ज्योति प्रकाशिता. Manifested in the abode of the modifications of the mind in dream and witnessing the impressions produced by actions. Due to ignorance, the self is called Tejas. All actions are due to ignorance, that is manifested with regard to objects consisting of impressions only. In deep sleep, due to ignorance, the self is called Tejas. It is then the self-effulgent witness. विषया वासना वापि चोद्यन्ते नैव कर्मभिः यदा बुद्धौ तदा ज्ञेयः प्राज्ञ आत्मा ह्यनन्यदृक्. In deep sleep, when neither objects nor their impressions are produced in the intellect by actions, the self, cognizant neither of objects nor of their impressions, is known to be prajna. That is one of unlimited knowledge. मनोबुद्धीन्द्रियाणां या अवस्था कर्मचोदिता चैतन्ये नैव भास्यन्ते रविणेव घटादयः. The conditions of the mind that is the dream state, and the senses, the intellect, that is the state of sleep, and the waking state, that is senses, produced by actions, are illumined by pure consciousness like jars and other things by the sun. तत्रैवं सति बुद्धिर्ज्ञ आत्मभासावभासयन् कर्ता तासां यदर्थास्ता मूढैरेवाभिधीयते. As it is so, illumining by its light the mental functions through which pleasure and pain are superimposed on the self by its proximity only. As it is so, illumining by its light the mental functions existing for it, the self is regarded by the ignorant only as an agent of those functions. सर्वज्ञोऽप्यत एव स्यात् स्वेन भासावभासयन् सर्वक्रियाहेतोः सर्वकृत्वं तथात्मनः. Therefore also illumining everything by its own light, the self is considered to be all-knowing. Similarly, it is regarded as the accomplisher of everything, as it is the cause of all actions by its proximity. सोपाधिश्चैव मात्मोक्तो निरुपाख्योऽनुपाधिकः निष्कुलो निर्गुणशुद्धस्तं मनो वाक्च नाप्नुतः चेतनो चेतनो वापि कर्ता कर्ता गतो गतः बद्धो मुक्तस्तथा चैको नैकशुद्धोऽन्यथेति वा. The self with adjuncts is thus described, but it is without adjuncts, indestructible, indescribable, without parts, without qualities, and pure, which the mind and speech do not reach. For philosophers differ in their conceptions about the self. Different conceptions are: the self is conscious, non-conscious, an agent, a non-agent, all-pervading, not all-pervading, bound, free, one, many, pure, not pure, and so on. अप्राप्यैव निवर्तन्ते वाचो देवी सहैव तु निर्गुणत्वात् क्रियाभावात् विशेषाणामभावतः. Words with the mind turn back without reaching it, as it is without qualities, without actions, and without attributes. व्यापकं सर्वतो व्योममूर्तैः सर्वैर्वियोजितं यथा तद्वदिहात्मानं विद्यात् शुद्धं परं पदम्. One should know the self, comparable to the ether, which is all-pervading and free from all objects, having forms to be the pure and supreme goal. In the Vedantas, दृष्टं हित्वा स्मृतिं तस्मिन् सर्वग्रश्च तमस्त्यजेत् सर्वदृग्ज्योतिषा युक्तो दिनकृच्छ्रार्वरं यथा. One should give up, that is, one should give up one's identification with them. One should give up the waking state in its impressions, that is dream and deep sleep, which causes everything to merge in itself. The self, the witness of them all, is then in the nature of pure consciousness, Brahman. Like the sun which has dispelled the darkness of the night. रूपस्मृत्यन्धकारार्थाः प्रत्यया यस्य गोचराः स एवात्मा समो द्रष्टा सर्वभूतेषु सर्वगः. Eliminating the modifications which have for their objects waking and dream are the objects of the modifications of the mind. Waking, dream, and deep sleep superimposed on the self. The all pervading self is the same in all beings and the witness of them all. आत्मबुद्धि मनश्चक्षुर्विषयालोकसङ्गमात् विचित्रो जायते बुद्धेः प्रत्ययो ज्ञानलक्षणः. Caused by ignorance, the body, the intellect, superimposed on the self. Caused by ignorance, the diverse functions of the intellect, called knowledge, come to exist when the body, the intellect, the mind, the eye, objects, and light happen to coexist with the self. विविच्चास्मात् स्वमात्मानं विद्यात् शुद्धं परं पदं द्रष्टारं सर्वभूतस्थं समं सर्वमयान्तिकम् समस्तं सर्वगं शान्तं विमलं व्योमवत् स्थितं निष्कलं निष्क्रियं सर्वं नित्यं द्वन्द्वैर्विवर्जितं. One should discriminate from these, the body, the mind, my intellect, etc. The self, which is the witness, free from all fear, free from all adjuncts, free from impurity, form like the ether, without parts and without actions, and know it to be the pure, supreme Brahman, the same in all beings, the all-pervading whole, the all-comprehensive principle, which is eternally free from all duality. सर्वप्रत्ययसाक्षिज्ञः कथं ज्ञेयो मयत्युत विमृशैवं विजानीयात् ज्ञानकर्म न वेति वा. One should ascertain whether pure consciousness, the witness of all the mental modifications, is knowable or not, and if knowable, whether it is an object of knowledge or not. अदृष्टं दृष्टुविज्ञातं दभ्रमित्यादिशासनात् नैव नेयं मयान्यैर्वा परं ब्रह्म कथञ्चन. The Supreme Brahman is never capable of being known by me or others according to the teachings of the Shrutis. Unseen, seer, unknown, knower, and infinite, like the reflection of itself. If thought to be known, and so on. स्वरूपाव्यवधानाभ्यां ज्ञानालोकस्वभावतः अन्यज्ञानानपेक्षत्वात् ज्ञानं चैव सदा मया. Independent of every other knowledge, of the nature of the light of pure consciousness, and not distanced by anything, not as an object of knowledge, but as a non-object. Brahman, my own nature, is always known as pure consciousness by me. नान्येन ज्योतिषा कार्यं रवेरात्मप्रकाशने स्वबोधान्नान्यबोधेच्छा बोधस्यात्मप्रकाशने. The sun does not require any light in order to illumine itself. So knowledge does not require any other knowledge except that which is its own nature in order to be known. न तस्यैवान्यतोऽपेक्षा स्वरूपं यस्य यद्भवेत् प्रकाशान्तरदृश्यो न प्रकाशो ह्यस्ति कश्चन. Just as one light does not depend on another in order to be revealed, so what is one's own nature does not depend on anything else. That is, being of the nature of knowledge, the self, does not require another knowledge in order to be known. व्यक्तिस्याद् प्रकाशस्य प्रकाशात्मसमागमात् प्रकाशस्त्वर्ककार्यस्यात् इति मिथ्यावचो यतः. A thing. This half verse is an answer to the objection that pure consciousness, though not capable of being known by another consciousness, knows itself like the sun, which, though not revealed by other lights, reveals itself. A thing naturally lacking luminosity. For a thing naturally luminous is not made luminous by anything else or by itself. So the self, which is of the nature of knowledge, cannot be known by another knowledge or by itself. A thing naturally lacking luminosity gets revealed, that is, has only its surrounding darkness removed when in contact with something which by nature is luminous. The saying, therefore, that luminosity is an effect produced on other things by the sun is false. Something. For a thing naturally luminous is not made luminous by anything else or by itself. So the self, which is of the nature of knowledge, cannot be known by another knowledge or by itself. Something, like example, a jar, non-existent, not manifested before, coming into existence, manifestation. For something, example, earth, else is called its effect. But light seems to be in jars, etc., which is the sun's own nature, does not come into existence from previous non-existence. सत्तामात्रे प्रकाशस्य कर्तादित्यादिरिष्यते. घटादि व्यक्तितो यद्वत् तद्वत् बोधात्मनेष्यताम्. Just as when jars and other things get revealed, the sun and other luminous bodies are called the agents of revealing those things on account of their proximate existence only, but are not really the agents. So the self, pure consciousness only, is called a knower on account of its existence, proximate to things known, but is not really an agent. बिलात् सर्पस्य निर्याणे सूर्यो यद्वत् प्रकाशकः प्रयत्नेन विना तद्वत् ज्ञातात्मा बोधरूपतः. Just as the sun, though devoid of effort on its part, is called the revealer of a snake coming out of its hole, so the self, though of the nature of pure consciousness only, is called a knower without agency on its part. दग्धैव मुष्णस्सत्तायां तद्वद्बोधात्मनेष्यताम्. सत्येव यदुपाधौतो ज्ञाते सर्पैवोत्थिते. Just as fire, which is naturally hot, is called a burner on account of its existence, proximate to things burned, so the self is a knower on account of its existence, proximate to objects superimposed on the self, objects of knowledge. When adjuncts are known, like the known means illumined, like the snake coming out of its hole. ज्ञाता अयत्नोऽपि तद्वज्ञः कर्ता भ्रामकवद् भवेत्. ज्ञाता यत्नोऽपि तद्वज्ञः कर्ता भ्रामकवद् भवेत्. स्वरूपेण स्वयं नात्मा ज्ञेयोऽथवा ततः. विदिताभ्यां तदन्यदेवेति शासनात्. बन्धमोक्षादयो भावास्तद्वदात्मनि कल्पिताः. Just as the self, though devoid of effort, is called a knower, so it is called an agent. Though devoid of effort, like the lodestone in its own nature, therefore it is neither capable of being known nor unknown, as it is taught in the Shruti that the self is different from both the known and the unknown. In the proximity of agents, etc., the self is called an agent, and as it is actionless, it is called non agent. That the self is different from both known and unknown. The ideas such as bondage, liberation, etc., are likewise like agency and knowingness superimposed on the self. नाहोरात्रे यथा सूर्ये प्रभा रूपा विशेषतः बोधरूपा विशेषान्न बोधा बोधौ तथात्मने. Therefore no liberation. Just as there is no day or night in the sun, as it is of the nature of light only, so there is no knowledge or ignorance, therefore no bondage in the self, which is of the nature of pure consciousness only. Knowing Brahman, described as having no connection with acceptance, knowing that the self is neither accepted nor rejected, and that it does not accept or reject anything, or rejection. For a clear understanding of the terms, the self and Brahman. According to the method delineated, one is certainly never born again. Janma mrityu प्रवाहेषु पतितो नैव शक्नुयात् इत उद्धर्तुमात्मानं ज्ञानादन्येन केनचित्. One who has fallen into the stream of births and deaths cannot save oneself by anything else except knowledge. भिद्यते हृदयग्रन्थिश्छिद्यन्ते सर्वसंशयाः क्षीयन्ते चास्य कर्माणि तस्मिन् दृष्टेति श्रुतेः. The Shruti says that the knots, that is the mutual superimposition of the self and the not self, of the hearts, knots of the heart are torn asunder, all doubts disappear, and one's actions come into an end when the self is seen. Mamaha mitye tadapoihya Mamahamitye tadapoihya sarvato vimuktadeham padamambaropamam sudrushta shastranumitibhyiritam vimuchyate smin yadi nishchito naraha. A man gets liberated if, after discarding in all respects the idea of me and mine, he gets perfect conviction in the ether like goal, self Brahman, which is devoid of the gross and the subtle bodies, and described here according to right inference, and therefore there is no possibility of there being any error here, and the scriptures well studied. पार्थिव प्रकरणम 16 चैप्टर 16 consisting of earth. पार्थिवक कठिनो धातुर्द्रवो देहे स्मृतो मयः पक्तिचेष्टावकाशास्योर्वह्निवायुवम्बरोद्भवा. The hard material in the body is known to be a transformation of earth. The liquid part consists of water. and heat, vibration, and empty space. The name is after the first word of this chapter in the text, Parthiva Prakranam. And that is the channels through which food, drink, and the mind move in the body. And empty space in the body are due to fire, air, and ether respectively. घ्राणादीनि तदर्थाश्च पृथिव्यादिगुणाः क्रमात् रूपालोकवदिष्टं हि सजातीयार्थमिन्द्रियम् smell etc. that is the senses and their objects are produced from earth etc. respectively as the senses have for their objects things of their own kind, that is color and light, the latter being of the same nature as the former, the object. बुद्ध्यर्था बुद्ध्यर्थान्याहुरेतानि वाक्पाण्यादीनि कर्मणि तद्विकल्पार्थमन्तस्थं मन एकादशं भवेत्. These smell etc. are called the organs of knowledge. The larynx and the hand etc. are called the organs of action. And the mind, the 11th, which is within the body, is for the purpose of knowing different objects one after another, and they tend to present themselves at the same time. निश्चयार्था भवेत् बुद्धिस्तां सर्वार्थानुभाविनी ज्ञातात्मोक्तस्वरूपेण ज्योतिषा व्यञ्जयन् सदा. The intellect is for determining objects, always illumining the pervading objects one after another. Intellect, by its light consciousness, its own nature, the self is called the knower. The purport of the above 4 verses is that the self is different from the body, the senses, the mind, and the intellect. व्यञ्जकस्तु यथा लोको व्यङ्गस्याकारताङ्गतः व्यतिकीर्णोऽप्यसङ्कीर्णस्तद्वज्ञः प्रत्ययैः सदा. Just as light assumes the forms of objects revealed by it but is really different from, though apparently mixed up with them, so the self is different from the mental modifications whose forms it assumes through its reflection while revealing them. स्थितो दीपो यथा यज्ञः प्राप्तं सर्वं प्रकाशयेत् शब्दाद्याकारबुद्धिर्ज्ञः प्राप्तास्तद्वत् प्रपश्यति. The self illumines the intellect in the forms of sound etc. present before it like a stationary lamp devoid of any effort and illumining everything within its reach. शरीरेन्द्रियसङ्घात आत्मत्वेन गतां धियं नित्यात्मज्योतिषा दीप्तां विशेषन्ति सुखादयः. Pleasure etc. qualify the intellect, identifying itself with the combination of the body and the senses and getting illumined by the eternal light of the self. शिरो दुःखादिनात्मानं दुःख्यस्मीति पश्यति द्रष्टान्यो दुःखिनो दृश्यात् द्रष्टृत्वाच्च न दुःख्यसौ. For one considers oneself to be distressed by pain in the head etc. The seer is different from the seen, which feels pain. The self is free from pain, as it is the seer of the pain. The seer is different from the seen intellect. दुःखी स्यात् दुःख्यहं मानात् दुःखिनो दर्शनान्नवा संहतेङ्गादिभिर्द्रष्टा दुःखी दुःखस्य नैव सः. One becomes unhappy when one identifies oneself with something, the self, which has assumed the form of unhappiness, but not by merely seeing it. The witness of the pain in the body, which is combination of the limbs, etc., does not feel pain. चक्षुर्वत् कर्मकर्तृत्वं स्याच्चेन्नानेकमेव तत्. संहतं च ततो नात्मा द्रष्टृत्वात् कर्मतां व्रजेत्. May it not be that the self is both object and subject like the eye. No, the eye becomes an object when seen in a mirror and a subject when it is in its own place. So identified with other things, the self is an object. Otherwise it is a subject, the objector. No, the eye consists of several parts and is a combination, and therefore it may be both subject and object as suggested by the objector. But the self does not become an object as it is the seer. Pure consciousness, it can never become an object, for an object is always the non-self. ज्ञानयत्नात्यनेकत्वमात्मनोऽपि मतं यदि नैकज्ञानगुणत्वात्तु ज्योतिर्वत्तस्य कर्मता. One may argue that the self also has many qualities such as knowledge, effort, and so on, and therefore, like the eye, it may be both subject. The objector means that the self possessed of the qualities of effort, desire, etc., may be a subject with certain qualities and an object with others. An object. No, it is not so. It can never be an object because like light, it has only one quality, namely knowledge. ज्योतिषो द्योतकत्वेऽपि यद्वन्नात्मप्रकाशनं भेदेऽप्येवं समत्वाज्ञ आत्मानं नैव पश्यति. Just as light, though an illuminator, does not illumine itself, so even according to the assumption, therefore one conscious part cannot make the other conscious part its object. Nor can we imagine that there may be a non-conscious part in consciousness. So itself, so even assuming that there is a self, there is a dividing line dividing it into two categories, namely subject and object in the self. It cannot illumine itself, for it is an homogeneous conscious nature. यद्धर्म यः पदार्थो न तस्यैवेयास कर्मतां न यात्मानं दहत्यग्निस्तथा नैव प्रकाशयेत्. Nothing. The self is therefore not the object of knowledge, which is opposed by some to be a quality of the self. Nothing can be an object of its own quality, for fire does not burn or illumine itself. एतेनैवात्मनात्मनो ग्रहो बुद्धेर्निराकृतः अंशोऽप्येवं समत्वाद्धि निर्भेदत्वान्न युज्यते. The doctrine of the Buddhist that the intellect, there is no self other than the intellect, according to the Buddhists. That the intellect is perceived by itself is refuted by this. Similarly, like the assumption that the self is both subject and object. Similarly, the assumption on the part of the self is also unreasonable, for it is of a homogeneous nature without having a dividing line in it. शून्यता पिनयुक्ता वै बुद्धे ज्ञेन दृश्यता बुद्धेरन्येन दृश्यता युक्ता तो घटवत्तस्या प्राक्सिद्धेश्च विकल्पतः. The doctrine of the void nihilism is also not reasonable, as it must be accepted, like the doctrine that the intellect is the self. Nihilist is also not reasonable, as it must be accepted that the intellect is witnessed like a jar by another, that is the self. For self exists before the intellect comes into apparent existence. अविकल्पं तदस्तेव यत्पूर्वं स्याद् विकल्पतः विकल्पोत्पत्तिहेतुत्वाद् यद्यस्यैव तु कारणं यद्यस्यैव तु कारणं whatever and first is self exists before the deep sleep. The intellect comes in waking and dream into apparent existence. Whatever, that is the earthen jar, is pervaded by anything that is earth, is an effect of that thing, the cause. Itself uncaused, the cause, the self, producing effects such as the intellect, pervaded by the reflection of existence, the self. The self must therefore have an existence anterior to that of everything. Hence, nihilism cannot be accepted, such as the intellect, etc., must therefore have an existence invariably anterior to that of the effect. अज्ञानं कल्पतामूलं संसारस्य नियामकं हित्वात्मानं परं ब्रह्म विद्यान्मुक्तः सदा भयम् मुक्तं सदा भयम्. Discarding ignorance, superimposed and therefore unreal, the root of all superimposition and a controller of transmigratory existence. One should know the self to be the supreme Brahman, which is always free and devoid of fear. Jagrat swapnau tayor bijam sushuptakyam tamomayam अन्योन्यस्मिन् सत्त्वाच्च नास्ति तेतत् त्रयं त्यजेत. Transmigratory existence consists of waking and dream. Their root is deep sleep, consisting of ignorance. No one of these three states has a real existence, because each goes out of existence when another remains in it. One should therefore give up all these three states. That is, one should know that they do not exist in the self or anywhere else, like a snake in a rope snake, when the rope is known. आत्मबुद्धिमनश्चक्षुरालोकार्थादिसङ्करात् भ्रान्तिस्स्यादात्मकर्मेति क्रियाणां सन्निपाततः निमीलोन्मीलने स्थाने वायव्ये चक्षुषः प्रकाशत्वान्मनस्येवं बुद्धौ नस्तः प्रकाशतः. Just as the closing and opening of the eyelids connected with the vital force and not with the eye are mistaken for the properties of the eye, which is of the nature of light, and just as motion, not a property of the mind and intellect, is wrongly attributed to them, which are also of the same nature, for they are instruments of knowledge. So the self, though really not an agent, is mistaken for one because actions arise when the body, the intellect, the mind, the eye, light, objects, etc. coexist with it. संकल्पाध्यवसायौ तु मनोबुद्ध्योर्यथाक्रमात् नेतरेतरधर्मत्वं सर्वं चात्मनि कल्पितम्. The peculiar characteristic of the mind is reflection, and that of the intellect is determination, and not vice versa. Everything is superimposed on the self. स्थानावच्छेददृष्टिस्यादिन्द्रियाणां तदात्मतां गताधिस्था हि पश्यन्नो देहमात्रैवेक्षते. Organs are thought to be not all pervading, as they do not function outside the body. But limited by their particular appendages, which are in the body. The intellect gets identified with the organs and hence with the body. Illumining the intellect, therefore, the self appears to be of the same size as the body. Jainas hold this view. क्षणिकं हि तदत्यर्थं धर्ममात्रं निरन्तरं सादृश्याद्दीपवत्तद्धेस्तत्शान्तिः पुरुषार्थता. Objection. Both knowledge and its objects are extremely momentary, that is perishable by nature every moment. They are appearances only without any permanent reality for a substratum, and are continually being produced, just as the lamp of the preceding moment appears to be the same in the succeeding moment on account of similarity. So both the objects and the subjects of the preceding and the succeeding moments wrongly appear to be identical on account of similarity. The goal of human life is the removal of this idea of the continuity in knowledge and its objects, and the removal of the discrimination to which it is due. The verse states the doctrine of the Buddhists. स्वाकारान्यावभासं च येषां रूपादि विद्यते येषां नास्ति ततश्चान्यत् पूर्वा संगतिरुच्यते. Reply. According to one school of these philosophers, color, etc., external things which are objects of knowledge exist. According to another school, external objects other than knowledge do not exist. Idealists. The unreasonableness of the former school is now going to be described. There is still another school according to which there are neither knowledge nor its objects. They are nihilists. बाह्याकारत्वतो ज्ञप्ते स्मृत्यभावस्सदाक्षणात् क्षणिकत्वाच्च संस्कारं नैवाधत्ते क्वचित्तुधिः आधारस्याप्य सत्वाच्च तुल्यता निर्निमित्ततः स्थाने वा क्षणिकत्वस्य हानं स्यान्न तदिष्यते. According to this school, knowledge has to be admitted to be identical. In that case, their doctrine would be the same as that of the idealists. And everything, both subjects and objects, being momentary, and the intellect, the receptacle in which the impressions of memory are to be retained, being non-existent because momentary, at the time of receiving the impressions, there will always be the absence of memory. Being momentary, according to them, the intellect never retains the impressions of memory. Again, recognition is said to be due to a misconception of similarity, but there is no cause. That is, example, parts, qualities, etc. Beginning from here, the arguments are also against the idealists of similarity between the preceding and the succeeding moments, phenomena belonging to the moments. If, on the other hand, a witness perceiving both the moments be admitted, the doctrine of momentariness is abandoned, but that is not desirable. शान्तेश्चायन्न सिद्धत्वात् साधनोक्तिरनर्थिका एकैकस्मिन् समाप्तत्वात् शान्तेरन्यानपेक्षता. The teaching of a means to the attainment of the end, namely the bringing to an end of the idea of continuity in knowledge and its object, becomes useless, for it requires no effort to be accomplished, as all phenomena exist only for a moment. The ideas of continuity and indiscrimination also being momentary, there is no effort necessary to remove them. As all phenomena exist only for a moment, the coming to an end of the said continuity does not depend on anything else. अपेक्षा यदि भिन्नेपि परसन्तानैष्यतां सर्वार्थे क्षणिके कस्मिंस्तथाप्यन्यान्नपेक्षता. If, according to you, the effect depends on the cause, though connected with it, you have to accept dependence on a series. Each phenomenon continually produced and destroyed every moment and produced again is known to be a series, which is quite foreign. Example, in order to be produced, curd may depend on sand instead of milk. If you say, though all things, that is, causes and effects, are momentary, some effects depend on some fixed causes, still nothing can depend on anything else, according to your doctrine of momentariness. तुल्यकाल समुद्भूता वितरेतर योगिनो योगाच्च संस्कृतो यस्तु शून्यं दीक्षितुमर्हति. That particular one of two things, example, a sprout and a cloud, existing at the same time and connected with each other, is fit to depend on the other, owing to whose connection it is benefited. Here ends the refutation of those who hold the doctrine of momentariness. मृषाध्यासस्तु यत्र स्यात् तन्नाशस्तत्र नो मतः सर्वनाशो भवेद्यस्य मोक्षः कस्य फलं वद. Our doctrine is that there is false superimposition on the self and its negation in the same self. Please tell me, this is refutation of nihilism. Who will attain liberation, the result of knowledge according to you, who hold that all, that is both the superimposed and the substratum, are annihilated. अस्तितावत् स्वयं नाम ज्ञानं वात्मान्यदेव वा भावाभावज्ञतस्तस्य नाभावस्त्वधिगम्यते. That oneself exists in is undoubted. You may call it knowledge, self, or whatever you like. A void, they call it. But its non-existence cannot be admitted, as it is the witness of all things existing and non-existing. The author's doctrine. येनाधिगम्यते भावस्तत्सत् स्यात् तन्न चेत् भवेत् भावाभावानभिज्ञत्वं लोकस्य स्यान्न चेष्यते. That by which the non-existence of things is witnessed must be real. All would be ignorant of the existence and non-existence of things if that were not the case. Therefore, yours is a position which cannot be accepted. Sadasat sadasaccheti vikalpat pragyadishyate tadvat tadadvaitam samatvattu nityam chanyad vikalpitat. That which must be admitted to exist before the deliberation about existence, non-existence, or both, is one without a second, as there cannot be a cause of diversity before there is any superimposition on it. It must be eternal and different from what is superimposed. विकल्पोद्भवतो सत्वं स्वप्नदृश्यवदिष्यताम् द्वैतस्य प्रागसत्वाच्च सदसत्वादिकल्पनात्. Accept duality as unreal, for it comes to exist by way of superimposition, like dream objects, and thus there is no evidence that duality exists when unknown. Not exist before. Example, in deep sleep, the deliberation about the existence, non-existence, etc. वाचारम्भणशास्त्राच्च विकाराणां ह्यभावता मृत्योस्स मृत्युमित्यादेर्मम मायेति च स्मृतेः. All the modifications in the primeval cause are known to be unreal according to the scriptures, which say that they have words only for their support. And that he dies again and again, and so on. The Smriti also says Maya is difficult to be get rid of. विशुद्धिश्चात एवास्य विकल्पाच्च विलक्षणः उपादेयो न हेयोत आत्मा नान्येन कल्पितः. The self is therefore, as all duality is unreal, pure, and the self is therefore pure and is of a nature contrary to that of what is superimposed. Hence it can neither be accepted nor rejected. It is because it is the ultimate substratum of all superimposition. It is not superimposed on anything else. अप्रकाशो यथादित्ये नास्ति ज्योतिस्वभावतः नित्यबोधस्वरूपत्वान्नाज्ञानं तद्वदात्मनि. Just as there is no darkness in the sun, as it is of the nature of light only, so there is no ignorance in the self, as it is of the nature of eternal knowledge. तथा विक्रियारूपत, if it underwent any change. मोक्षोऽवस्थान्तरं यस्य पृथक्स्य चलो ह्यतः न संयोगो वियोगो वा मोक्षो युक्तः कथञ्चन. संयोगस्याप्यनित्यत्वात् वियोगस्य तथैव च गमनागमने चैव स्वरूपं तु न हीयते. स्वरूपस्यानिमित्तत्वात् सनिमित्ता हि चापरे अनुपात्तं स्वरूपं हि स्वेना त्यक्तं तथैव च. Liberation becomes artificial and therefore transitory according to the philosopher, who holds that it is a change of one state into another on the part of the self. Again, it is not reasonable that it is a union with Brahman or a separation from nature. As both union and separation are transitory, liberation cannot consist of the individual self going to Brahman or of Brahman coming to it. But the self, that the self itself is liberation, is the conclusion. One's own real nature is never destroyed, for it is uncaused and cannot be accepted or rejected by oneself or by others, while other things, example states, etc., are caused. स्वरूपत्वान्न सर्वस्य त्यक्तुं शक्यो ह्यनन्यतः ग्रहीतुं वा ततो नित्यो विषयत्वात् पृथक्त्वतः अविषयत्वात्. As it is the self of everything, not different from anything, and not an object like a thing separate from it, the self cannot be accepted or rejected. It is therefore eternal. आत्मार्थत्वाच्च सर्वस्य नित्य आत्मैव केवलः त्यजेत्तस्मात् क्रियाः सर्वाः साधनैः सह मोक्षवित्. Everything transitory is for the experience of the self, which is eternal and free from all adjuncts. Liberation is therefore nothing but being established in one's own self. As it is so, one aspiring after liberation should renounce all Vedic actions with their accessories. आत्मलाभः परो लाभ इति शास्त्रोपपत्तयः अलाभो न्यात्मलाभस्तु त्यजेत् तस्मादनात्मताम्. To know the real self, Brahman, the universal self, to be one's own is the greatest attainment according to the scriptures and reasoning. To know wrongly the non-self, such as the ego, etc., to be the self, is no attainment at all. One, therefore, should renounce this misconception of taking the non-self for the self. गुणानां समभावस्य भ्रंशो न युपपद्यते अविद्यादेः प्रसुप्तत्वान्न चान्यो हेतुरुच्यते. The deviation of the gunas from the state of equilibrium which they have during the dissolution of the universe with their consequent evolution is not reasonable, For no cause of this transformation are admitted inasmuch as, according to these philosophers, ignorance is then merged. Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, the three constituent essences of the material cause of the universe called the Prakriti or Pradhana in the Sankhya philosophy. The Sankhyas. Ignorance is then merged. Individual souls, Purushas as they are called, are always spectators only, and Ishwar is not admitted. Refutation of the Sankhya doctrine. इतरेतर हेतुत्वे प्रवृत्ति स्यात् सदा नवा नियमो न प्रवृत्तीनां गुणेष्वात्मनि वा भवेत्. If the gunas be the causes of their mutual change, there will always be change or none at all. If one argues that there cannot be a continuous transformation in the gunas as creation, maintenance and dissolution are known to come one after another, still there will be no regulating cause of the modifications of the gunas acting either on the purushas. Purushas are immutable, or on the gunas, and no other categories are admitted in the Sankhya philosophy. विशेषो बद्ध मुक्तबद्धानां तादर्थेन च युज्यते अर्थार्थीनोस्त्वसम्बन्धो नार्थीज्ञो नेतरोऽपि वा. If, as admitted, the Prakriti or Pradhana work for the bondage and liberation of the Purushas, there will be no distinction, for all Purushas will be bound or all liberated as the same. Prakriti works for all Purushas at the same time. There will be no distinction between the bound and the liberated. Moreover, there is no relation between what is desired, that is liberation, and one who desires it as the Purusha has no desire at all, neither the other, that is the Prakriti, for it is non-conscious. प्रधानस्य च पारार्थ्यं पुरुषस्याविकारतः न युक्तं सांख्यशास्त्रेऽपि विकारेऽपि न युज्यते. As the Purusha is changeless, it is not reasonable according to the Sankhya philosophy also, like other non-Vedic systems of philosophy outside the pale of the Vedas, that the Prakriti can work for it, even admitting change. In that case, the Purusha will have to be admitted to be transitory and not, as it is supposed, the Lord of the Prakriti, which is admitted to be eternal. Purushasya cha mitho yuktam tadartatvam pradhanasya chitittatah. As there can reasonably be no mutual relation between the Prakriti and the Purusha, and as the Prakriti is non-conscious, it is unreasonable that the Prakriti can render any service to the Purusha. क्रियोत्पत्तौ विनाशित्वं ज्ञानमात्रे च पूर्ववत् निर्निमित्ते त्वनिर्मोक्ष प्रधानस्य प्रसज्यते. If any action is admitted in the Purusha, it must be perishable, If it is argued that the action in the Purusha is of the nature of knowledge, if knowledge is pure consciousness, the Purusha cannot be the lord of the Prakriti. But if it be phenomenal, Purusha becomes perishable. Nature of knowledge, only we meet with the difficulty spoken of before. If uncaused action is in the Prakriti be admitted, it becomes unreasonable that there can be liberation. न प्रकाश्यं यथोष्णत्वं ज्ञाने नैवं सुखादयः एकनीडत्वतो ग्राह्या स्युः कणादादिवर्त्मनां. Pleasure, refutation of Kanada's Vaisheshika doctrine. Pleasure, etc., cannot, as held by the followers of Kanada, be the objects of knowledge, for they are the properties of the same substance. The individual soul, according to this philosophy, souls have qualities such as knowledge, pain, pleasure, etc. Just as heat, the property of fire, cannot be revealed by light, another property of light, fire. युगपत् समवेतत्वं सुखविज्ञानयोरपि मनोयोगैकहेतुत्वादग्राह्यत्वं सुखस्य च. Pleasure and knowledge cannot come together, as each of them is separately caused by the contact of the mind with the self. Therefore, pleasure cannot be the object of knowledge. तथान्येषाञ्च भिन्नत्वाद् युगपज्जन्म नश्यते गुणानां समवेतत्वं ज्ञानं चेन्न विशेषणात्. As other qualities also are different from one another, like knowledge and pleasure, they cannot be produced at the same time. If it be contended that the knowledge of the qualities is nothing but their coming in contact with one and the same self, we say no, for they are qualified by knowledge. Example, we say known pleasure, known pain, etc. ज्ञानेनैव विशेषत्वात् ज्ञानाप्यत्वं स्मृतेस्तथा सुखं ज्ञातं मयेत्येवं तवाज्ञानात्मकत्वतः. Pleasure, etc., are surely objects of knowledge because they are qualified by it, and also on account of the memory. Pleasure was known by me. Moreover, they cannot be known by being connected with the self only, and not with knowledge, for the self is non-conscious. Whatever is different from knowledge must be non-conscious, and non-conscious pleasure, pain, etc. cannot be known when it in contact with a non-conscious self. For the self is non-conscious as it is different from knowledge, according to you. सुखादेर्नात्मधर्मत्वमात्मनस्ते विकारतः भेदादन्यस्य कस्मान्न मनसो वा विशेषतः. Pleasure, etc. cannot be the qualities of the soul, as it is changeless. For souls, according to them, are all of an infinitely extended nature and are therefore changeless, according to you. Moreover, why should pleasure, etc. of one soul not be there in another soul's, and also in the mind, as difference is common? Just as pleasure, etc. are different from one soul, they are so from other souls and from the mind. श्यान्माला परिहार्यातो ज्ञानं चेत् ज्ञेयतां व्रजेत्. युगपद्वापि चोत्पत्तिरभ्युपेता इष्यते. If knowledge be the object of a second, it is admitted by the Vaisheshikas. Second, knowledge regressus ad infinitum is inevitable. If, however, a simultaneous production of the two knowledge from one single contact of the mind with the self be admitted, you must accept the simultaneous production of color, taste, smell, etc. from the same contact. अनवस्थान्तरत्वाच्च बन्धो नात्मनि विद्यते नाशुद्धिश्चाप्यसङ्गत्वात् सङ्गो हीति च असङ्गो हीति च श्रुतेः. There is no bondage in the self as there is no change of condition in it. There is no impurity in the self inasmuch as it is unattached, as the Shruti says. सूक्ष्मैकागोचरेभ्यश्च न लिप्यत इति श्रुतेः. The self is eternally pure as it is beyond mind and speech, one only and without any attributes. As the Shruti says, it does not get attached. एवं तर्हि न मोक्षोऽस्ति बन्धाभावात् कथञ्चन शास्त्रानर्थक्यमेव स्यान्न बुद्धेर्भ्रान्तिरिष्यते. बन्धो मोक्षश्च तन्नाशः स यथोक्तो न चान्यथा. Objection: if this is be so, in the absence of bondage, there cannot be any liberation, and the scriptures are therefore useless. Reply: no. Bondage is nothing but a delusion of the intellect. The removal of this delusion is liberation. Bondage is nothing but what has been described. So the scriptures are not useless as they teach the means to the removal of this delusion. बोधात्मज्योतिषा दीप्ता बोधमात्मनि मन्यते बुद्धिर्नान्यस्ति बुद्धेति सेयं भ्रान्तिर्हि गता. Illumined by the light, the reflection of the self, pure consciousness, the intellect falsely believes that it is itself conscious and that there is no one else which is so. This is delusion. It is in the intellect. बोधस्यात्मस्वरूपत्वात् नित्यं तत्रोपचर्यते अविवेकोऽप्यनाद्योऽयं संसारो नान्येष्यते. Consciousness, which is of the nature of the eternal self, is superimposed on the intellect. This indiscrimination is also beginningless, like the ignorance to which it is due. This indiscrimination and nothing else is what is called transmigratory existence. मोक्षस्तन्नाश एव स्यान्नान्यथा अनुपपत्तितः येषां वस्त्वन्तरापत्तिर्मोक्षो नाशस्तु तैर्मतः. The removal of this discrimination and nothing else is what is called liberation, as all other conceptions of it are unreasonable. It is the destruction of the self according to those who consider liberation to be the change of the individual self into a different being, Brahman. अवस्थान्तरमप्येव मविकारां न युज्यते विकारो वयवित्वं स्यात् ततो नाशो घटादिवत्. Similarly, it is also not reasonable that liberation is a change of condition on the part of the self, as it is changeless. If, however, any change be assumed to exist in it. It must be admitted to consist of parts and so to be destructible like jars and other things. तस्माद् भ्रान्तिरतोऽन्या हि बन्धमोक्षादिकल्पनाः सांख्यकाणादबौद्धानां मीमांसा हतकल्पनाः शास्त्रयुक्तिविहीनत्वान्नादर्तव्याः कदाचन शक्यन्ते शतशो वक्तुं दोषास्तासां सहस्रशः अपि निन्दोपपत्तेश्च यान्यतोऽन्यानि चेत्यतः त्यक्त्वा तो यन्यशास्त्रोक्तिर्मतिं कुर्याद्दृढां बुधः श्रद्धाभक्ति पुरस्कृत्य हित्वा सर्वमनार्जवम् वेदान्तस्यैव तत्त्वार्थे व्यासस्याभिमतौ तथा. Therefore, the conception of bondage and liberation different from this is wrong. The conception of the Sankhyas, the Kanadas, and the Buddhists about them are not tenable according to reason. They should never be accepted, for they are not supported by reason and the scriptures. Hundreds and thousands of errors of their part may be mentioned. As the scriptures other than the Vedas have been condemned in the ancient sacred tradition. The tradition is this: those learned ones who want pure religion should doubt about the truth of the various scriptures found in the world, which are other than the Vedas, etc. In the ancient sacred tradition, scriptures other than these, they should not be accepted. A wise man should give up the teachings of such scriptures and all crookedness, and with faith and devotion should have a firm understanding of the true import of the Vedantas accepted by Vyasa Badarayana, the author of the Vedanta aphorisms. इति प्रणुन्ना द्वैतवादकल्पना निरात्मवादाश्च तथा हि युक्तितः व्यपेतशङ्काः परवादतस्थिरा मुमुक्षवो ज्ञानपथेषुरीत्युत. False doctrines of dualism and those according to which the self is not admitted have thus been refuted by reasoning, so that those who aspire after liberation may be steady in the path of knowledge described in the Vedantas and be free from doubts arising from others' doctrines. स्वसाक्षिकं ज्ञानमतीव निर्मलं विकल्पनाभ्यो विपरीतमद्वयम् अवाप्य सम्यग् यदि निश्चितो भवेत् निरन्वयो निर्वृतिमेति शाश्वतीम्. Having attained the extremely pure non-dual knowledge of Brahman that leads to liberation immediately, which is its own witness, and contrary to what is superimposed, a man, perfectly convinced of the truth of the self, becomes free from ignorance and gets eternal peace. परस्य देहेन यथा विमानिता परस्य तद्वत् परमार्थमीश च इदं हि विज्ञानमतीव निर्मलं सम्प्राप्य मुक्तोऽथ भवेच्च सर्वतः. Just as one is free from the ideas of me, इदं रहस्यं परमं परायणं व्यपेतदोषैरभिमानवर्जितैः समीक्षकार्यामतिरार्जवे सदा न तत्त्वदृक्स्वान्यामतिर्हि कश्चन. Having a firm grasp of this secret knowledge that the self is Brahman, the supreme goal, and being free from defects and vanity, people should always fix their minds on Brahman, which is always the same. For no man who knows Brahman to be different from himself is a knower of truth. अनेकजन्मान्तरसञ्चितैर्नरो विमुच्यते ज्ञाननिमित्तपातकैः इदं विदित्वा परमभिपावनं न लिप्यते व्योम इवेह कर्मभिः. When he acquires this knowledge, the supreme purifier, a man becomes free from all merit and demerit produced by ignorance and accumulated in many other lives. He, like the ether, does not get attached to actions in this world. शान्तचित्ताय जितेन्द्रियाय च प्रहीणदोषाय यथोक्तकारिणे गुणान्विताय अनुगताय सर्वदा प्रदेयमेतत् सततं मोक्षवे. This knowledge should be imparted only to him whose mind has been pacified, who has controlled his senses and is free by the performance of Vedic actions without a desire for their results, from all defects, who has practiced the duties enjoined by the scriptures and is possessed of good qualities such as learning, humility and truth, who is always obedient to the teacher and aspires after liberation only. परस्य देहेन यथाभिमानिता परस्य तद्वत् परमार्थमीश च इदं हि विज्ञानमतीव निर्मलं सम्प्राप्य मुक्तोऽथ भवेच्च सर्वतः. Just as one is free from the ideas of me and mine in respect of others' bodies, so one becomes free from those ideas in respect of one's own body. When one knows the supreme truth, one becomes immediately liberated in all respects on attaining this very pure knowledge. न हि लाभोऽभ्यधिकोऽस्ति कश्चन स्वरूपलाभात् सहितो हि नान्यतः न देयमेन्द्रादपि राज्यतोऽधिकं स्वरूपलाभं त्वपरीक्ष्य यत्नतः. There is no attainment higher than that of self-knowledge in the worlds of men and gods. It arises from nothing but the Vedantas. This knowledge of the self, superior even to the kingdom of Indra, should therefore not be imparted for any person without examining him carefully. Thus completes 16th chapter of Upadesha Sahasri, to be continued in next part from 17th chapter. Hari Om.